I was born on November 5th, 1949, at the Altoona Hospital, although I do not remember that very well. My parents were John and Cecilia Riley. 607 Fifth Street, as my dad used to say, was the only address he ever knew. My mom grew up in Ebensburg. In fact, my mom's father died in an accident up at what they call Lake Ravina in Ebensburg. It's right there when you go in to the town off Route 22. I guess in those days they cut ice in the lake for probably refrigeration purposes, and he was cutting ice and fell into the lake, and I guess got pneumonia from the cold.
That's the big lake that you can kind of see?
Yeah, right there when you go up the mountain. Yeah.
We were just there for Potato Fest.
For what?
Potato Fest or whatever they do in Ebensburg.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, we parked right there. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he was only in his 20s, I guess.
How old was she?
Was she?
Yeah.
She was just an infant.
Oh, gone.
But then the mom remarried. Her mom remarried because I guess in those days women didn't have much choice. They rarely were in the workforce. So she remarried, and I guess that family was not real receptive to having young kids, or I don't know how to put it. But she wasn't my mom wasn't real welcomed in the new family. So she lived a lot with her grandfather up there on almost what you'd call a farm. I could show you going into town. We went up there a lot when we were kids. So she had a lot of uncles on that side of the family. And then she lived a little bit with the Adams, the Adams family, not the Adams family you see in the horror movies. But so on the Sundays, we used to go up there and we'd visit the Stinson family, which was on the farm, and that was like my mom's maiden name, I guess. Cecilia Ann Stinson, yeah. Then there were the Stormers family, which was another group of people. I guess that was, I'm trying to think now what the connection, maybe that's where my mom, his mother eventually married into that family. And then there was the Stinsons, the Stormers, and the Adams all lived in Ebensburg. So we'd go up there on the weekends and like make a 3-way tour, stopping at each house or something to say hi to all these relatives. I guess you could say we were probably fairly poor, but as a lot of kids say, you never realized that. So Juniata in those days was all middle-class families, just polluted with middle-class families. Most of the fathers worked in the railroad, and that's where your granddad and my dad worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He was he did car repairs on, I guess, box cars, coal cars, whatever. But yeah, you could roam the streets of Juniata in those days, and it was just kids everywhere. It was all middle-class families. What was your other question? Oh, what was it like?
Yeah.
Oh, it was fun. I had a good time. Everybody sort of hung out together. All the kids hung out together. Um, in the we went to I went to Catholic school. Most of my friends who weren't Catholic, I guess, went to McKinley in Juniata, which was the public school. I went to Holy Rosary, which was the grade school.
And where do they have the classes for that?
The classes?
Yeah.
Oh, it's still there. The building, the school was a separate building, about 2 blocks from the Catholic church here. There's Holy Rosary.
That was where you went to school.
This building was the school, and that was the convent where the nuns lived. They were there with the lighter yellow house now. You see that little tower there, they had the bell, the school bell. There's usually 4 nuns at that school each year, and they lived in the convent. And when I was an altar boy, they would say there would be a mass every day at the convent. So some of us would get assigned to a week's worth of morning masses, and we'd go down and go into the side door of the convent and get our little uniforms on, our vestments, I guess, and sit in like a little parlor area till the priest got there, and then there was a tiny little chapel, and they'd have a daily mass there for the 4 nuns. But we played at the school. It was just a little playground, but we got to the point in the summer we could play wiffle ball in there and hit it over the fence. You got a home run. The bigger school, McKinley, had a field which we spent a lot of time there in the summers playing football, touch football, and into the fall. So as soon as the weather would change, where the fields would dry up from the winter, we'd be out there playing wiffle ball on the fields, and then towards fall we'd always be playing football. And there were a lot of every playground was like that. In fact, in those days, in the summer, the Altoona Rec Commission would sponsor activities at every playground. And there were, in just Juniata section, there was McKinley, which we all hung out at. There was Juniata, East Juniata had a playground. Memorial, where the pool was, Memorial Pool had a playground. And they'd each have a young college student who was probably into teaching, would be the director, the playground director. And they'd come the whole summer, like June, July, August, probably from 9 o'clock in the morning till, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and they'd all have all this equipment like kickballs and volleyballs, and so basically the playground, we just hung out in the playground all summer long. You'd usually go in the morning, goof around in the playground, and then around noon you'd get down to Memorial Pool and spend the whole afternoon at the swimming pool. So the big deal in those days was you'd get a season pass for Memorial Pool. It was $5 for a season pass to go all summer long. And if you didn't have a season pass, it was $25 to get in to the pool. So we used to figure if you could go 20 times, whatever that is, 5 fours, 20 times. So if you got 20 punches on your ticket, you were like getting freebies because you're not paying the quarter. So we all used to see how many punches we could get, how many times we'd get down. Literally, we went there every day if it didn't pour down rain or something, to the swimming pool, at least in the beginning of the summer.
And what do you, I guess, I remember diving for quarters and tube night when it was our generation. What were you guys doing in the pool? Were you having fun dips? Was there a concession stand?
There was a concession stand on the other side of the road. You'd have to walk out of the pool, and you could walk across to the Juniata Pavilion, and they had a little concession stand there. It wasn't fenced in, or it was fenced in, so you had to walk out, but you had I think they stamped you, put a stamp, like a little rubber thing that put a stamp on you, so you could walk over, buy food, walk back in. If you had the stamp, you were good to go. So yeah, oh my God, that pool would have tons of people. You couldn't even move on the cement. There were so many people there on blankets and stuff like that. And moms, I think a lot of moms, we were old enough that we go by ourselves then, but there were a lot of mothers would bring the young kids there. It was a section. There was the shallow section, probably a couple feet up to where you had like a high dive and a regular dive down in the deep end, which is probably 12 feet deep. So in those days, like when I was growing up, you had Memorial on the one side of town, you had Prospect, which is still operating. They fight that every year, but it operated last year up around on the side of the hill there by Altoona High. And then a section I never really spent much time. You had Lakemont had a pool. Mm-hmm. So most of the kids in the area would spend the summers at those pools. This whole thing where the splash park is now was the pool. And this side here, right where those blue things are, was like the dive, the one dive, where this mushroom, or down on this end, was the high dive. So this was the deep end of the pool, and to the far side there was the shallow end of the pool. Oh, we rode bikes everywhere.
What was the story on Kill Hill with your bike and the accident that happened there?
Oh, yeah, that's funny. I've lived in Altoona my whole life, and when people ask you an address, you would think you'd know it. But I have to, pace off the streets. But the hill, there's a real steep hill by Noble, what used to be Noble School. It isn't there anymore, the school. It was steep. I guess somebody looking at it today might go, well, that isn't that steep of a hill. But I was 6 years old at the time. 6, probably headed towards 7, because I was in second grade, and I wound up in my first communion picture, which you make your first communion in second grade. In the picture, I had you can't see it, but I had a cast on my arm from a broken arm. So we go up to the hill, and I don't know where we were headed, a bunch of us, and I had my bike, and somebody said, well, just ride it down the hill. And I guess I was a little afraid, I think, but I thought, yeah, I guess I can ride it down the hill. So I got on it and was coming down the hill, and there must have been a brook right out in the middle of the road. And by the time I saw it, I didn't go around it. And then the rest is just told to me because I was out cold, that I must have flew over the handlebars, and I did skid, I guess, on my arms and face up through the asphalt. And so the next thing I knew, I woke up at the Altoona Hospital. I had a broken arm in my face was all like scarred up or cut up and was bandaged at the time. So when they took the bandages off in 3 or 4 days or whatever, it had all these little red squares, like almost like a pepperoni on a pizza on the one side of my face. And that, it all healed up, but when I'd get running or something for a couple years afterwards, these spots would break out. You'd see the spots from where it was all brush, I guess a brush burn or something like that. But that all eventually went away.
Who were you with? You were with Uncle Dave?
I think Uncle Dave was there because he ran home and told my mom and dad, and they came up and got me. I was the people that saw the accident. 2 teenagers came out and got me off the street, and I was up in their bathroom at a house right there at the bottom of the hill, and Mom came running up the steps to see me, and then they took me up to the hospital.
And so you had a concussion, and you don't recall?
I don't know if I had I never really heard if I had a concussion, but I was knocked out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you get knocked out without having a concussion, but I was unconscious till I woke up in that bathroom and somebody was dabbing my face. And then what I recall, it may not have been immediately, but then my mom came in and came running up the steps, and then we wound up going to the hospital. The part I wrecked on, like right at I must have hit something right near the bottom. I made it down the hill right in here, then I flipped over the handlebars, I guess. I stood up here and looked down first. Probably me, Dave, whoever else was there. And it was like, whoa. You know, and then you just said, okay. And it was like, but I didn't wreck till I was at the very bottom.
I would have thought right here, you like smack here and go airborne.
Nah, but I probably was moving. I don't remember. Here, right in here's where I wrecked. One of these houses is where they came out and got me and took me in there. So in those days, that's an interesting story. In those days, I was in the hospital for a week with that. Today, you'd probably be in there for an hour.
Yeah.
You know, they'd set your arm and say, hey, come see me in a week or something. I think because I know I hated that time because I was getting 2 shots a day, and I think it was penicillin, and I just would flip when those nurses would come into the room and didn't want to roll. They always wanted to give it to me in my ass, I guess, probably because my arm would have got sore, but I'd put up a hell of a fight, but they always gave it to me. And I think I remember the doctor telling my parents that they didn't want to release me till they got rid of the cold or whatever. I must have had a cold, but it sure the hell penicillin didn't do a hell of a lot for me. Now maybe that was just my impression, and the penicillin was to fight off infection if from the cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah. Did you get in trouble
for that?
Yeah.
Not really. I think they
just happy you were alive.
Yeah, no, I didn't get in any trouble that I could recall, because I guess I was sort of so banged up. I don't know what they would have done to me. My bike, I felt bad. My bike was a little banged up, but I think we got that straightened out because I continued to ride that bike.
What was it? Do you remember what kind
of?
It
was a little 20-inch. It was like a starter bike. It was cool. It was a Hawthorne, which I'm not even sure they make them anymore. But they sold them up at there was a place up in Altoona there. It's sort of, it's not Woolworths. What the? It wasn't Woolworths. That was a five and ten. And it wasn't Sears, but it was like a Sears, and I think it began with a W. But anyway, they always had a lot of bikes in the basement. You'd go in, you get down the steps, and at the bottom of the steps were all these bikes. And it was a cool little black bike. It was black, which I liked. It had like these silver fenders and stuff. But it was only 20-inch tires. So when you got to the big bikes, you moved up to whatever, a 26-inch or something like that. But that's what it was that I wrecked on.
Yeah.
And when you got, you sort of started out, there certainly was a pecking order to, or I guess a class system or a caste system. The older kids controlled everything. And you sort of moved up through the ranks, and then eventually you were controlling everything. Yeah, you started out with training wheels on your bike, and then that was a big deal when you could ride a two-wheeler on your own, and then you were sort of you could roam around old Juniata. But yeah, especially playing sports and the pickup games, at the basketball courts and on the football fields, you'd get the younger kids would watch, or at least the boys did. I don't know about the girls, but we'd watch the older kids, and they'd be out playing, and you didn't. I mean, they just had the field. You didn't even think of going out there because they were much bigger than you. And then eventually, some of my fonder memories is when the younger guys started to get to an age where you'd go out there and play with the bigger guys. And then eventually, the younger guys all playing together could beat the bigger guys. And then it was sort of like the bigger guys would either graduate high school and move on, and you were the top guys in the neighborhood then. Because football, especially touch football up there, we got to the point we would dominate all over the place, and then you'd go to school and tell your buddies at Altoona or BG, and we wound up going all over the city playing guys in football. And we laugh about that. You could talk to my cousin Jack or Kenny Beekler or my brother Dave. I mean, we never lost a game in like 4 or 5 years. We had some 50-game winning streak, and we'd tell people. And the one time we went up to Prospect and played these guys, and they had a couple guys come in from Altoona High. We were playing, I think it was WFBG Radio had a team, had a team, not of radio guys, but guys they went out and rounded up. And I remember that game vividly. We were out there at Prospect, and when you played on fields, everybody had different layouts to the field, so you had to sort of get a grasp for what was out of bounds, where the touchdowns were, and all that. And I remember going up to Prospect, and they really had a loaded team, or at least names that you recognized from the high school. And so I remember the first pass in that game, they threw some pass, and this kid caught it against, me and Kenny and Dave were usually like the defensive backs, and this guy went in and made one hell of a catch. And I thought, damn, we're gonna be in some battle here today with these guys. We wound up winning that like 10 touchdowns to nothing or something like that. So once we got rolling, it was all speed. Touch football is all speed, and they'd have big guys. They'd come in with these big guys. hell, we'd track him down like no problem, you know. If it would have been tackle, it might have been a different thing. But we would get into tackle games every now and then with guys. They'd say, "Oh, you can't play this. We'll play tackle." I was telling somebody else. They said, well, we won. We eventually won the championship. And somebody said something about getting tackled out there. I said, I never got tackled. I said, I just outran everybody. And I said, so they'd throw me a pass and these guys would all come in to tackle me and I'd put a move on and be gone. And they couldn't believe it. I said, no, I don't think I ever. They said, didn't you ever get hurt out there in that concrete? I go, well, no, I never got tackled out there. I said, I just run away from everybody. And so, yeah, I always think as you get older, what do you miss? People always say, what do you miss? I always say, I miss being fast. There were times where it was just incredible. The one, when I was at Penn State, we had an intramural softball team, and that I wasn't the star. I was nowhere near the star of that, but we had a professional guy pitch. This was a fast pitch league, not slow pitch. So this kid played in the summers. People would pick him up down around Philadelphia to play in leagues. And I took batting practice against this guy. You couldn't even freaking see the ball coming at you. So we got into the playoffs, I think, the first year. We won that 2 years in a row. And the first year, we get into the playoffs. We're playing these other guys. And we were so far ahead that I was probably the instigator. I was playing like shortstop or something. And I just went over to second base and sat down. And then I called all my buddies in from the field and that. While the other team was batting, we just sort of sat at second base watching. And my roommate, Fletcher, his nickname was Fletcher at the time, was sitting right beside me. I'll never forget this one guy somehow swung and got his hands, or got his bat on the ball. And it came flying right up the middle at us, all sitting on the ground. And my buddy Fletcher just grabs it. It was like the only guy who ever even made contact, and Fletcher just got it, you know. And he didn't have his mitt on. He caught it barehanded. So